I introduce a little bit, can everyone hear me? Yeah? So like you said, I am a senior QA specialist at Lucid Software. So fun story, a developer on my team, I am actually a purely manual tester, and a developer on my team was the one who encouraged me to come and speak at UtahJS because he thought, well, all developers need to know how we actually manually test things too. So at Lucid Software, we have a 2-week development cycle. It's pretty fast-paced in my mind because it's such a huge product. And it can get kind of intense sometimes, especially the day before a release for a tester, because we have about a 700 case test suite just for our regression testing alone. It's very intense. We have 12 manual testers doing that. And we have all sorts of other methods we use at Lucid that I don't think are standard across the industry yet, but I think provide a lot of help and relieve a lot of this intense pressure that you feel going up to a big release. Whenever you want that feature to go out, you want it to be ready for the user. You want to make sure the user's not going to just stumble upon a bug all of a sudden, which I'm kind of insinuating is like a bomb in this case. So, because that's kind of how it feels whenever a user writes in and there's that bug they found, and all of a sudden you're like, oh no, how could I have found that instead? So it's just some core takeaways that I hope you get out of this talk. The first is pair testing, then session-based testing, also called an SBT. It has nothing to do with the build tool. So, like I said, the key takeaways from this talk: pair testing, session-based testing, bug scrubs. It's also a method I like to call test all the things, and a bug triage. Okay, so kind of going back to my bomb theme idea. So the core steps to get rid of a bomb is to prevent it in the first place. If you can catch it before it even goes off, that's amazing, right? That's what you want. And an ounce of prevention is definitely worth a pound of cure. And so a lot of things you can do to prevent bugs from getting to your users is first getting everyone trained on your product itself. It is kind of amazing how often different people will come up to the testers at our organization, because we know the product better than anybody else probably in the whole, I want to say, world at this point, because I am in it 8 hours a day, all day, every day, except for right now. And then, so getting everyone trained on the product. So if all the developers knew all the different aspects of the product that existed, they're more likely to understand how it interacts with each other. And if I impact the download dialog, how can that impact my print and ship dialog, which also involves downloading. Other things is having actually working automation tests. This has been a struggle for years, I think, for us, because getting our test suite to where it is now has been just an uphill climb, but it has been completely worth it because it's taken, I think, 5 or 6 hours every week out of my job, which I love. And then finally, give your teams the tools they need to test. I kind of think of this scene from the IT crowd. Anytime I think of a really bad tool, like why on earth would you use Vista on anything? So a little bit of, try not to move my arm. Oh, they go out? Okay. So we started at our organization something called Test Ops, which means I am in charge of the release, and the release cannot go without my say-so. And a lot of it is making sure our test environments are up and running. And for the first year, I think at Lucid, we didn't have extremely solid and reliable test environments. They would crash for no good reason. They would just do all these crazy things. And so one of my fellow testers, Alex, worked really hard with our ops team to develop an environment that we call pre-production, which is
set up on the back end exactly like our production environment, which means it doesn't go down nearly as much whenever I load a 1,000-page document, and that it's just reliable, and I know if I see a bug in this environment, it's going to be the same thing I would see in production. Because could you imagine just trying to test something you're trying to get it to look like production, but your test environment just doesn't match production at all? Like, how do you expect to find bugs that way? You can't. So that is one of the critical things I think has helped us build a very high quality product, because we have these environments, and we have multiple environments now that just match production, which is wonderful. And this is kind of my mantra as well in prevention, is test early, test always. I am always telling everyone, like, you can be testing too. It doesn't take that much. So for instance, something I always ask is, how can I get code tested sooner? For a long time, QA would just test on the master branch, which is kind of all the developers. We have, like, I want to say 60 now-ish developers. All their code all merged together for the week, and that's where I would be testing. But instead, why can't I just test on an individual developer's branch before it's even merged to that big, huge code base? Which is what we're doing now. And so I know exactly which developer broke what, because this is your branch. I know it's broken on your branch, but not broken here. You broke it. It's way easier to get a quality product whenever I can get it tested that soon. And then finally, how can I get it tested more efficiently? And that's sort of what the rest of my talk is going to be about today. So first off in prevention is pair testing. So I'm going to go with a few of you have done pair programming before. This is a very similar idea. Pair testing is two team members, notice I say team members, work together at one keyboard to test the product. So this can be between anyone invested in the story. It can be between, I frequently will grab our UX designer who created our new feature, and we'll have him sit down because he can find the little nitpicky, like, this is off by 1 pixel flaws way before I can, because he designed it himself. And then before it's merged, I like sitting down with a developer for 5 minutes and just looking at it on their branch, on their computer, and getting their opinion on the story, like asking all the questions, like, what do you think this will touch? What actually changed? How many lines of code did you actually change? And then also grabbing our product manager helps sometimes, because he has a very good insight into what the users actually want and if it's a very intuitive flow. But I would say most frequently I do it with another developer on my team. And the big reason to do pair testing, one, you can catch bugs and issues much faster. As soon as the branch is done and it's pulled up on the dev's machine, I am looking at it, which is wonderful. Like, I can just catch the issues right then before it's merged, and it's 10 times easier for him to fix or things like that. It also has the added benefit of developers learn how testers think. They always know I'm going to ask certain questions about whatever they're changing. They always, like, they learn the questions I'm going to ask and what kind of things I'm always going to have issue with. Like, can I resize the screen even? Like, they know I'm always going to ask that, and they're ready for those questions, and they know how I'm thinking about these things. And then finally, the testers actually learn the story from the person who wrote the code. Before pair testing, it was usually a pain for me to get acceptance criteria from whoever needed to write it. And now it's just much easier because I'm already there asking about it, and I can write the acceptance criteria myself if I need to. Okay, so I'm going to challenge you guys a little bit. This is it's a new-ish dialogue that came out this year in the product I test for Lucid Press. And this is our print and ship dialogue. It lets you order prints online. So I am going to let you guys look at it, and I want you to tell me what kind of things you would test with it. This is in production, so it's kind of scary. So look at it for a minute, get ideas of like what kind of things you would want to be tested on here. And I want to hear from you guys because it's kind of boring to talk the whole time for me. So, and you can shout out whenever you're ready. Wow, you guys. Yeah, frequently when you see things grayed out, you're thinking instantly subscription levels. That's a great thing to think always. In this case, it is grayed out because there are different document sizes you can order, and I just know that. So like this is a 5x7 card, and we want to make sure you only see the 5x7 options of what you can order. But that is a great thing to think. It happens all the time where things are grayed out, and you have to know why, which is why I would want to make sure, oh, is there some sort of information as to why this is grayed out? Is there a paywall if it's a subscription level gray out? Is it because the document doesn't match that size? I need to know this information, and otherwise the user's just going to be confused as to why in the world is this grayed out? Any other things you guys would test? Yeah. Yeah, you want to click all the buttons. That's one of my favorite things is I think the developers get really annoyed whenever they hear my keyboard just go like, and I'm making sure everything works. Like that. Probably the image manager, that shouldn't pop up on top of this, right? Anything else? Just keep going, guys. Yeah. Now? Can you hear me now? Yay! Okay. What if you leave it blank? What happens? Let's find out. Oh man. Probably bad things happen. I got a file called PDF now, guys. Okay. I'm still going. Okay, but it still takes me to the page, and I have a lot in my cart. And it allowed me to do it with a blank name. Probably not an ideal situation. Okay. Oh, no, I was talking. Oh, she's so nice. Okay. What else are you guys thinking? So, like, how many characters can I have in here? Will it allow me to do an apostrophe? That's one of my favorite ones because apostrophes always break in these things. Will it take an emoji? I'm not going to find an emoji to play with right now, but that's a good one. There's a lot of different things. Oh my goodness. Yeah, special characters. I really like my language. Like I said, I speak Japanese. So my keyboard, I always like test things to make sure they actually accept Japanese characters. Oh, it changed it to English. Let's see. It does. Isn't that great? Ooh, let's find out. See, and this is the point of pair testing. That's what I was trying to demonstrate to you guys. Like, me by myself, I'm not going to come up with every single test case imaginable. The more people you get involved testing, the better off you're going to be because the more things you're going to find. So let's see if it allowed me to do Japanese in there. If you're wondering, that says Japanese is awesome. So that's what that is actually saying right there. Cool. Oh, this, like the 3-step process? Yeah, like is there a way for us to decrease the number of steps it takes to get from picking out your document and to actually ordering, because the end goal is for them to pay us money and by ordering these prints, right? So like making it easier, and that's part of testing too. It's not all about bugs by any means. It's about how can I improve the product so the user gets the best experience possible. You guys are so smart. I'm so proud. Okay. All right, so those are kind of what I would categorize as things you can do to prevent things from even, like, these are all things I like to do before all, like, the code is merged into the master branch. And then once it is merged, this is kind of how I feel at my desk. Once it's all merged together and I'm testing everything, I'm doing that 700 whatever step regression testing. I am just going crazy. And so we have a process that we call session-based testings. I will call it an SBT from here on out. I hope you're not confused as to what I'm talking about. So an SBT is whenever a tester, and I say tester, anyone's a tester who wants to be, you write out a plan for an area of the product, test it for a very specified amount of time, and then follow up with the QA with another member of your team. I would follow up with another member of the QA team. So yeah, these are mainly done by people on QA themselves. However, I have trained multiple people at my company on how to do an SBT in order to get them up to speed on the product. Because that's just one of the best ways, I think, to get up to speed, especially for new hires. So what you want to do is set aside 30 minutes to 2 hours of time, and I would limit it to 2 hours, because if you're anything like me, you can't really focus that long on one thing, and like my breaking point is about 2 hours of trying to focus on one thing, so you got to stop after a point. Okay, and then you create a charter, which is just your end goal of what you're actually trying to accomplish with this test. For instance, on the print and ship dialog, when it was a new feature, I ran an SBT, like before it was sent out to any of our users, I ran a SBT on it just to find bugs. That was the purpose of my test, was find as many bugs as possible. However, for one of our new hires, I would recommend just making it a goal of learning, learning this area of the product. Okay, and then finally you set up the areas you're going to test, which is kind of what you're going to test. And like whenever I think of an area to test, I always kind of do it by actual space, if that makes sense. Like one of my areas would be these 1, 2, 3 buttons up top, making sure they work. Making sure that this section, the size section works, options section works, and that they work with multiple sizes, making sure everything, all the options right here work, and things like that. So those are setting up the areas of your product. Okay, and then you finally start your SBT, and you time yourself for 15-minute intervals. I usually just go to Google and say 15-minute timer, and I have my headphones on, and it alerts me every 15 minutes. And it's very loud and obnoxious in my headphones. And then at the end of every 15 minutes, you always need to ask yourself, am I on charter or that goal that you set earlier for yourself? And that's not necessarily a bad thing. Like if you're not on what you're trying to do, maybe you're going down a different path, that is okay. And maybe you feel like this new path that you found while doing your session-based test is way more beneficial, and you're going to find more bugs or a lot more new knowledge that way. And then at the end of the SBT, you want to set up a meeting. This is probably the most important step in my mind, and it kind of goes back to what I said about pair testing. It's always important to talk to another person and get another person's insight on your testing. It can be hard to get feedback, I know, but like there is a certain tester at my organization who I know she is the best edge case tester I could ever imagine. She finds everything wrong, and I don't know how she does it, but she always gives me new ideas of how I can improve. And so I like to go to her to get areas like maybe I missed something huge whenever I was testing this, like, oh, maybe I should have played around with that progress bar a lot more and see what I could do to break that. And she can give me those ideas, which I love. And so the big purpose, the big why of an SBT is you just get to catch those edge cases being implemented before they're being implemented in production. And then another reason is, like I said earlier, it can be kind of stressful to test things on a deadline, and it kind of gives you a chance to breathe out. So I hope all of you are actually following this GIF right now and trying to calm down a little. And so that's another reason I like SBTs. It just kind of gives you a chance to reset your brain. And then finally, again, you get to learn the product and become an expert in it. Okay, so next is containing bug triages. Have any of you guys ever done a bug triage before? Yes, a couple? Okay, cool, they're great. So fun story, I used to be a resident assistant in college. I know, super cool job. Definitely helps in QA when I get to tell people, yeah, you're screwing up. But whenever I went to college in Utah, and part of the resident assistant training was how to handle an earthquake, which you don't even think about with resident assistants really, but it's what we did. And I remember part of the training that scared me the most was learning how to do a real triage in a disaster scenario and taking out markers and marking people's foreheads. Oh my goodness, it was scary. And I'm super happy that whenever I found out about bug triages at my new job, it was a lot less scary. But you're still, like any triage, you're prioritizing things. That's the point. So for us, we get together with our product manager always. He's the one who runs our bug triages. And the point is to prioritize. You have your big bugs, you have your little bugs that you can kind of let slide. If it's a little ladybug, you can, let it fly away. But, if you see a cockroach, you want to get rid of that thing. That's what I like to think about with bug triages. Ooh. There we go. Okay, so who is involved? And it's just between anyone invested in your story or product. So for Lucid Press, we have a dedicated support member who is very highly involved, and he knows our users way better than anyone else on the team. So we like to get him involved because he knows, okay, this is the kind of bug a user would actually want to be fixed versus, something that's way out there and only 3 users have ever seen in the whole history of the company. And so that's why we always include a support person. PM, he helps run the meeting. UX to give design input. QA, because I usually know if the bug's already been reported, and I know the backlog like crazy. And then a developer, because developers can really give insight into how complex a story is always. So it's usually a 5-minute daily meeting. I like to think of it more as a get-together because it's super informal how we do it. Or it can just be once or twice a week. And then you just use whatever bug tracker you have. We have Jira. And you compile a list of anything that hasn't been prioritized yet, whatever your priorities are. And then you just take into account the different perspectives in that room and prioritize it. And yeah, like I said, this is the why. And I really like it just for that second reason, because I learn these are the issues that are actually cropping up a lot. I learn what's the flaky parts of the product, and it's just handy to know for my future testing needs. Okay, and finally, clean up. And this is where bug scrubs come in handy. We have these once every sprint, which is once every 2 weeks for us. And it's a process, it's a much bigger pair testing is how I kind of think of it. It's kind of involving a lot of people at once in pair testing. And you go through a specific area of the product and you understand it and find the issues. And then you can also use this to go through and clean up your backlog, make sure the issues are still happening as well. So who all is involved? So the one we have every 2 weeks, it's every single member of the QA team is involved in that one. So 12 people from across the organization get involved and are invested in testing a very specific area of the product. And I keep going back to that print and ship dialogue, but that was an example of a time where we did a bug scrub. So I did pair testing on it. I did a bug scrub on it. I did an SBT on it. Like, you're getting the idea. Like, you can do all these things with each new feature you have rolling out. And I also sometimes will hold these with everyone on my team, kind of like how you have it with bug triages. Like, you get everyone together and you're in that area for an hour and you're just playing with it however your mind works, which is great. But what you'll always want to do is define your purpose before your meeting. You always want to have a goal in mind, whether it's cleaning up your backlog of bugs or testing a complex new feature. It can be anything you want, whatever you think of. And then you want someone who's in charge of the meeting, and you want a central location to quickly report things you find. I don't like using Jira to report these things until after the meeting, because usually you're finding them like really, really fast, and it's kind of hard to report issues there super, super fast. And the purpose of a bug scrub is just, like I said, clean out your backlog or just learning new parts of the product. And that's kind of the purpose of all this, is you want to know your product, and the better you know it, the better you can test it, the easier it is to be able to find bugs. And so hopefully, after using all these things and learning your product, you can kind of feel like this guy does whenever he finds a bug bomb, and you're just feeling good. Okay, so that's my presentation. Do we do questions now? Okay, any questions for me? Yes. Okay, so like, okay, so until it's out in production, you don't have like support team, and it's a large product. Okay. Yeah, I would just leverage maybe your QA member. Something I frequently do is right before a release, we have this huge document, because our releases are pretty big. Are yours pretty big? Yeah, our releases usually have lots and lots of new code in it. Yeah. Tons of new features. And so what I like to do is I sit down with the support team beforehand as someone who's tested all the new features before they go out, and I have a document, it's just a Google document, and I tell the support team, hey, this is what's going out, this is what you need to know. You need to be aware, like, the download dialog is a little bit at risk because we changed a few things with it. And so that's something I like to do, is like go and train support myself on what to be aware of and how to file new issues. And they usually come to me before they go to the developers about like figuring out like what kind of an issue is like specific to a document or specific to a user, or is actually widespread throughout the whole product. Sorry. Here. Yeah. So how does that transition into DevOps is what you were asking? Like, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so like you kind of have like a little hacky fix, like if you copy the document, it's all of a sudden fine, or something like that. Like we've had those kind of hacky fixes before. So a lot of it is, again, just training on the product, I think. Like, you're going to have new support people who don't really know what's going on. Fun fact, I actually started in support, so that's why I think I involve them in a lot of things, because I realize, oh, they're actually a really good tool for us to leverage. But I think a lot of it is having your QA and support work together, because I can usually train them on like the little hacky workarounds I have, and get that fixed for the user who complained about it almost immediately. And then like the developer can go in later and like I'll bring it to the attention of the developer. I feel like QA can actually be kind of a liaison, because the way I think about it is like QA can translate for developers into normal people speak. And so that's why I like to be the liaison between the two, is I still have enough manual knowledge that I can kind of translate. Does that make sense at all? Okay. Any other questions? Yeah. So last year I actually gave a talk on this exact subject at Open West. My husband also works at Lucid Software, and he is a developer. Great guy. And we gave a talk together about things that testers do that bug developers, and things that developers do that bug testers. And honestly, one of my, like, if you want just a pet peeve, is probably saying like testers break things is one of my weird pet peeves, because I don't feel like I break things, I just find what's broken. But I can send you that blog, like we wrote a post about it, and I can send it to you if you're interested in knowing more. Just come down and talk to me after. Any other questions? Yeah.
So you said that you pair test with any number of people, but mine is more focused to develop.
Uh-huh.
And then you said sometimes you go through a story without acceptance criteria, and then you write that acceptance criteria yourself.
Yeah.
How do you go about doing that? Because within our workflow, I think it can be processed without acceptance criteria. So
Yeah.
how is it up to you to create that acceptance criteria after your product manager or
So I think Lucid is kind of a unique place to work, because we're kind of like, we aren't really focused on process as long as it gets done well. And so we kind of make it up as we go along a little bit. And I've been there for like 3-ish years now. And so I've been there for almost half the life of the company. And so I got to help kind of make up the stuff we do. And it is great whenever a product manager or the product owner can write the acceptance criteria. But sometimes for like little stories, like maybe you have like this huge story, the whole print and ship dialogue is an epic, for instance, but like just that download bar was one small part of that huge epic, and there's no real acceptance criteria. But like whenever I sat down with the developer who wrote the bar, he actually told me all the math behind getting it to work and how long it should go and things like that. And so I wrote that in the ticket so that future QA people who are curious about the product progress bar could actually know like all the kind of background details that our product owner may not have realized at the time he wrote the initial ticket. Does that make sense? Okay. Any others? Yeah, right there. Oh my goodness, yes. So our automation strategy, oh my goodness, this is a long story. I'll try to shorten it. But right now, for every story that goes out, there has to be a unit test. Like the developer actually has to write a unit test beforehand. But until about 2 years ago, we didn't really have Selenium tests or Jasmine tests or things like that. And then we hired one particular developer who was very into them, and he started writing them for the organization. And then about a year ago, they became common practice to write Selenium for major features, Selenium tests, and now we have, I want to say like 200-300, no, that's way too many. We just have a huge Selenium test suite now that we run. but some of the tests aren't so great. They're a little flaky, but we also now have dedicated automation engineers that we've hired about 6 months ago, and that's part of our big automation strategy, which has helped a lot. But before that, it was mainly manual testers and unit tests, keeping us together because it was kind of scrappy a little bit. It's a lot bigger now, so. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, is there a perfect number between testers and developers? Sorry. Last question. Yes and no. It kind of depends. Whenever I have like 2 interns who are still in college and still kind of learning things, I can usually handle them. I feel like 2 interns can be the equivalent of 1 full-timer. But I think it's best whenever I only have 3 to 4 at most developers, and that's about how many I'm at right now. So, and I think that's the best way to handle it, but I've been upwards of 10 before, which was pretty intense, and then we started hiring like crazy. So, yeah. The end.